Halloween season is arriving, and with that comes some terrifying news for Dungeons & Dragons. Hasbro have risked absolutely everything on the upcoming new Dungeons & Dragons edition One D&D, but new data has been revealed that suggests that this new edition might be an unmitigated disaster for the company and for players. And not to be outdone, I've been diligently acquiring some of my very own research, and what I've discovered could mean the end of Dungeons & Dragons, because I'm Discourse, this is Dungeons & Discourse, and we don't just report the news here, we make it! Not in a bad way though. I mean, I didn't climb a clock tower and start firing indiscriminately into a crowd. I could have done that and no one would have been able to stop me until it was too late. But I've been sick this week and climbing a tower felt like a lot of work. Maybe next year. Anyway, if you've been watching the channel or following Dungeons & Dragons, then you know all about One D&D, the new Dungeons & Dragons edition. If not, then you've presumably just woken up from a coma, and so I'm happy to inform you that Bubbles the chimpanzee is A-okay. Michael didn't make it though. Subscribe for more contemporary celebrity facts like this. Also, incidentally, there's a new edition of Dungeons & Dragons coming out. It's called One D&D, and it's scheduled to careen onto our tables in the next year. A year which some have referred to as the Time of Judgment, the Days of Reckoning, and the Clock Tower gunshot times. Not me though, I just call it 2024, so you can stop watching now, Mr. FBI agent. Okay, great, I think they're gone. Now, One D&D has been a little bit of a complicated phenomenon. It started off originally as the new Dungeons & Dragons, replacing 5th edition entirely. But then Wizards came out this year and said that it's not a new edition, it's an update to 5th edition. And that kind of confused things. There'll be a new Player's Handbook and Dungeon Master's Guide and Monster Manual all coming out, and they'll all have new rules and new content, but all of that new content will also supposedly be compatible with the 5th edition books that were released in 2014. Frankly, I'm confused. Is it a new edition or not? Well, that would be an ecumenical matter. Regardless though, we know it's bringing a lot of changes to the much beloved 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons formula, and obviously these upcoming changes have been well received by the wider community, what with change notoriously being a thing that everyone loves. No, wait. Hold on, sorry. It's the other way around. People are not happy with the changes. Not all of the changes anyway. One D&D is still retaining a lot of the same foundational stuff from 5th edition. Yes, the action economy is still the same, the classes are mostly the same, but there still are plenty of changes to get annoyed about. Class mechanics are being vastly overhauled. The core rules of D&D are kind of being fiddled with. This ain't as drastic a change as from 3rd edition to 4th edition, but there's still quite a lot going on. And all of these changes have garnered a whole boatload of vigorous debate in the Dungeons & Dragons community. And in a historic first for the channel, vigorous debate in this instance is not a code word for anal sex. But if there's one thing that the wider community can agree on, it seems to be that Wizards of the Coast are getting things all wrong and can't be trusted to produce a better version of D&D. And that's not me saying that. That's a new poll that was published in the One D&D subreddit recently, asking whether players trust that the game designers at Wizards of the Coast will deliver the changes to D&D that the game truly needs with One D&D. And the results were not great. The vast majority of the responses were totally negative, with most respondents saying that they don't trust the Sorcerers of Sand at all. However, that's not to say that the fan base is totally without any faith. While a lot of respondents said that they don't believe the changes coming with One D&D will be good for the game, they do trust, however, that D&D will continue to be the most popular game in the TTRPG market. And this wasn't said in the same triumphant tone that accompanied American Voices after the bombing of Hiroshima ending World War II. It was said in the same despairing tone that accompanied American Voices after the bombing of Hiroshima ending World War II. Looking through the responses to the poll, it seems like people in the One D&D subreddit are actually sad that Dungeons & Dragons will continue to be popular with the new edition, even though Wizards of the Coast seemingly can't deliver what the game needs in their opinion. And that's pretty wild, right? I mean, the One D&D subreddit should, in theory, be the biggest space cheerleading the new edition of Dungeons & Dragons. I mean, if you look at other subreddits for things like video games, war games, RPGs, famous big wave surfer Laird Hamilton, yes, there is always some negativity or annoyed posters or even bots claiming outrageous things like they invented toe-in surfing. But usually these subreddits are filled with the mega fans, the people who want to see a game grow and be popular, especially if they happen to be a subreddit for what should be an exciting new addition to a popular game that they love. Right? Well, not in this case, and that should be a really concerning weather vane if you're Wizards of the Coast. But hey, this is only one poll, right? So I decided to confirm things. I decided to gather some data of my own. And this week I polled you. Yes, you, Jim, put down the beer. And I asked my audience the following. Do you trust Wizards of the Coast to deliver the changes to Dungeons & Dragons that the game truly needs? And this got more responses than even the original One D&D poll. There were over 3,000 responses to this one at time of writing. And the responses to my poll legitimately shocked me. I was expecting my results to mirror the One D&D Reddit survey with maybe a 60-40 split in favor of no, but what I got instead was over 97% of respondents said no, they don't trust Wizards of the Coast. This is a hugely disproportionate number of people who do not trust Wizards of the Coast at all to deliver a good version of their most important franchise. And that's a really wild number. It's what some would call statistically significant. Now, there's obviously a bunch of caveats to this. The numbers we're talking about are a tiny segment of the millions of people that play Dungeons & Dragons, and the places that these questions have been asked contain a certain segment of the D&D population. It's mostly the puss hounds that watch my videos, for example. But it must be said that this is an absolutely dire response for Wizards of the Coast, one that I personally don't take any joy in. This ain't like Grandpapa's funeral. I'm not expecting any money out of this one. And while we shouldn't read too much into them, I gotta say these polls do match my anecdotal experiences. I've noticed that when I go into D&D spaces these days, be that amongst other content creators or in online spaces like Reddit or even just in-person games, I just don't see as much excitement for the game anymore or even the future of the franchise. Instead, the community seems to be filled with exasperation. There are routinely pleas for people to try other games coming from the most ardent D&D players. I'm not sure I've ever seen anything like this within any gaming community that I've ever been a part of. Not in Warhammer, Magic the Gathering, World of Warcraft, Russian Roulette. People just don't have faith in Hasbro Wizards anymore. Let me tell you, people playing Russian Roulette don't have a lot to live for. A bit more than D&D players though. So we come to the question of our time. What the hell is causing so much pessimism in the D&D community? Is it that Wizards of the Coast have been changing some of the mechanics of the game for One D&D, the new not edition? After all, the last year has been dominated by public playtests from WotC trying to gauge what people think about the changes to the game that they're bringing in the new year. Are these polls a reflection of the distaste at what is changing mechanically to the various D&D classes in the new edition? Is this a response to those mechanical changes? Are people just unhappy with what D&D is going to look like next year when it comes to gameplay? No, I don't think so. I don't think that the dislike of One D&D is reflective necessarily of anything that's happening in One D&D. I think it's more to do with the overwhelming destruction of Wizards of the Coast reputation among the broader player base. It's remarkable. I've seen companies trash their reputation, yes, but not at the scale and speed of WotC over the last few months. It took the Catholic Church f***ing kids for centuries to get this kind of response, but it's hard for me to say that this pessimism, this despair, this contempt isn't deserved. In a lot of ways, Hasbro Wizards have gone a bit mask off in the last year. To be frank, they've been a bit of a show recently, and Hasbro Wizards have indeed indulged in some sweet delights that even I thought would be far below them. If you had told me in January that the OGL scandal was just the beginning, then, I mean, I would have believed you. But I'm extremely cynical and should be sent to live in the caves amongst the mole people. However, someone nicer than me, like, I don't know, who's not, Samwise Gamgee, they probably would have been taken aback and likely said something about potatoes.
Boil them, mash them, stick them in a stew.
But I mean, AI DMs, sicking the Pinkertons on a content creator, price increases, a virtual VTT, calling D&D players undermonetized, attempting to assassinate Bubbles the chimpanzee. This is not the way to rehabilitate a brand or get a player base back on side. It's evident that Wizards of the Coast are clearly huffing paint fumes at the minute and running on empty, and people are reacting to that, even if lots of tables are still playing D&D. And while at the best of times this wouldn't be such a big deal, this does come at a particularly bad time for Hasbro Wizards because One D&D is a new edition of Dungeons & Dragons, whether or not WotC want to acknowledge that, and ultimately these polls are a sample of the feelings of the hardcore audience. Yes, that's right. If you're watching me right now, you're in the hardcore. Welcome to the team. And this is a demographic of people that WotC really need to take care of because, as they have acknowledged themselves, it's the hardcore Dungeon Master demographic that buys most of their products, that brings in most of their income. And this general disdain that they've garnered from that player base could really hurt uptake of the new edition. Still, nevertheless, none of this is a sure thing. I'm really curious to see whether or not these surveys, and even my own experience, reflect the casual market and have an actual material impact on the sales of the new edition. But as Einstein said in the hit Red Alert 1 cutscene, sooner or later, time will tell. So subscribe to the channel to keep up to date because One D&D is coming soon and we're going back in time to stop Hitler or Gygax or somebody. I mean, they both basically did the same thing anyway, unless I've changed history to stop it, that is. Oh, and click this video to see the digital version of One D&D. And if you want to help support this channel acquire extremely important ammunition for an upcoming hidden project next year, then please check out my Patreon at patreon.com/discourse miniatures. And a huge thanks to my patrons, especially CryptoKev, Novani, and Travis Hunter. Thank you so much, guys, and I'll catch y'all next time. Bye-bye. I think I nailed the anal sex thing, right?